Blue Owl was born under a cloud of controversy. Who wants to tell me that story?
I guess I'll take that story. It actually turned into a lot more smoke than fire, but ultimately at the time we announced the transaction, we had about 50 underlying GP partners within our stakes business.
These are general partnerships in which you had acquired a minority interest.
Correct. Within our funds, we owned about 50 minority partnerships, and 48 of those partners called and congratulated us on a great idea, wished us all the luck in the world. And there were two that really wanted to cause a little bit of chaos and make a little bit of a distraction for us. I think each had a different reason for it, and we don't necessarily appreciate it, but ultimately I think we weathered the test, and the courts upheld the position that we felt from the beginning was the right one, and we were able to complete the deal, and we're back on track, hopefully long-term partners with those last two holdouts.
I'm going to name those firms. Sixth Street is one and Golub Capital is the other. And they objected to this merger of your two firms, Owl Rock and Dial, because it turned at least one of them from it turned the combination, right, from a passive investor into what they perceived to be a competitor. Did you anticipate how bitter that fight was going to get?
I really didn't anticipate that it would be that bitter. I didn't think it would be bitter at all, because contractually, these two very sophisticated firms knew exactly what they were getting into when they sold a piece of their business to our fund. Dial 3 in the case of Sixth Street, and Dial 4 in the case of Golub. And any restrictions that they had or didn't have were regarding the fund's ability to do something, transfer or move that position around. There was never any engagement about what the Dial business or the Owl Rock business could do with itself. And I think as the court upheld in very colorful language, we were certainly right and they were certainly wrong.
Marc, Owl Rock competed with these firms to varying degrees. Did you anticipate that it was going to get that ugly?
We did not anticipate it at all. At the end of the day, these were, to call them what they were, manufactured disputes, with an end state in mind.
You think it was all BS?
Well, I wouldn't call
He's
it
nodding.
BS, but I would say it was manufactured dispute. So it was commercialism and opportunism, or maybe it was emotion. I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, the reason it never crossed our mind that this would be a problem is because it's not a problem. Because the reality is that the stakes themselves are passive. Part of the brilliance of the model that Michael and the team created is being able to own stakes in a series of firms that themselves are competitors, because each one is held separately. Each one is passive. The information that is provided to Dial, which itself is subject to information barriers in our own firm, has nothing to do with the operational day-to-day transacting a business. So there is no competitive information that's available. So the reason it wouldn't have crossed our mind is we know there's no there, so to speak. And furthermore, let's just reflect for a moment. The other two people in this business are Blackstone and Goldman Sachs. So who have vastly larger businesses in credit, and in that case, private equity, than we do. So this idea that that's somehow a problem, it was a manufactured idea. But you know what? It's behind us. It's sound and fury. We want those firms to thrive. We have stakes in them. We're vested in their success. So we're wishing them well. We know they'll do great. That chapter is gone.
Even if you came out victorious in court, which you did it come at all at something of a personal cost, given that you had a personal friendship with Alan Waxman, who runs one of these firms, Sixth Street?
Yeah, we would have hoped that Alan would have approached it in a much more professional and friendly way. But, at the end of the day, what Sixth Street is really good at is trying to extract a little money from somebody when they see the chance. And unfortunately for them this time, they're better credit managers than they are litigants.
The ultimate question, of course, is whether the fallout from that dispute becomes an obstacle to future deals.
Well, what you have to understand is that the folks that operate really collectively in our industry, that know the players, that know what we do and are considering selling a minority piece of their firm to us, they know all this. They know there are information barriers. They know there is no there. And so they sort of laughed at the whole concept itself. The whole dust up was just Golub being Golub and Sixth Street being Sixth Street. They never thought that it would ultimately impact their business. And you saw that right after the dust settled and we closed the Blue Owl deal. We announced 2 very large transactions, each of which had a large credit business, and showed to the world that there was really no impediment to us continuing our momentum within the GP stake space.
Why do a SPAC?
It was the only way to do it, because you had a private company, Neuberger Berman, that was interested in the idea but didn't want to trade a unit of its firm for a passive private interest in another firm. That wouldn't ever, that might get stuck forever. They wanted to know that they had a path to liquidity, and so you had to pull this all off on a single day, and that's what made it complex. You had to combine the 2 entities and list it, and to do so, you really can't do that in a regular way IPO. That takes too much time, leaves the IPO window open for too long.
Here's a twist, and it's kind of part of how this became its own little, soap opera melodrama. You referred to before, some of the stories and the so-called, fights that went on. Look, people really want to see a Wall Street soap opera. They just watch the show Billions, but people like to manufacture things too. And there were elements here that allowed people to craft their own narratives and stories. And the SPAC is part of it, because the SPAC market has obviously surged and become all the rage. We would have been perfectly happy to do a traditional IPO, but as my partner Michael pointed out, we needed to have a mechanic where we could be public and merged on the same day. That's a SPAC, whether that was 10 years ago or in the middle of the SPAC frenzy.